Okay, so the European soap continues. Apparently, unelected EU dictator Ursula von der Leyen announced a couple of days ago that she wants to do a second stint as unelected president of the European Commission. The question, however, we have to ask is, why does she want to do this? I mean, hasn't she created enough chaos and destruction in Europe already? Do we really want this person who has identified herself as a true transatlantic politician, in her own words, by the way, which means that she's basically a whore of the Americans, a political servant of Washington? Do we really want this woman to continue her reign of complete and utter nonsense in Brussels? Do we really want this woman to continue a complete destruction of Europe's fledgling democracy? Do we really want this? Well, no, of course we don't want this, but are we going to have a choice? Probably not, because let's be honest, the EU is still not a democracy. No, it's not, as long as the executive arm of the EU, which is the European Commission, which is also, by the way, the de facto legislative arm, because they come up with all the plans, they come up with all the initiatives, they come up with all the laws, and they also execute all the laws. So they are basically the government of Europe, the government of the EU. As long as the Commission is not elected by anyone, we cannot say that the EU is a democracy. We cannot. And the person who has overseen this complete disgrace, this democratic deficit over the past 4 years, which is von der Leyen, now she wants to come back to the EU to do it all over again for another 4 years, which is going to be the complete end and death of any kind of democracy in Europe. But it gets weirder, man. It gets even more batshit crazy than that, because it turns out that running the EU is not even her first choice of job. She doesn't really want to do this. It turns out that she really, really, really wanted to be the new head of the Nato. She actually wanted to be the new head of Nato, but her own German chancellor, Scholz, went behind her back and basically told everyone, no, we as Germans don't want her to be the head of Nato, because we as German government consider NATO to be more important than the EU, which is also telling, of course, telling is shit. We consider NATO to be more important than the EU, and we don't want von der Leyen to become the new head of NATO. We want her to basically do whatever, but as long as she's not doing anything with NATO, because apparently that job has already been reserved for the Netherlands' own dictator, that bastard Rutte. So we see here that now von der Leyen actually didn't want to have a second stint as European Commission president, but now suddenly she does, because she's realized that she's not going to get any other really high-paying job, because nobody really wants her, right? Nobody really wants her. So this is what we've stuck with now, right? This is what we're stuck with. We're going to have another von der Leyen commission, which is something nobody wants, headed by a woman who's created such a disaster in Brussels, which has created such devastation in Brussels, that she's not fit for the job. And moreover, she herself has shown that she is not really interested, right? She's not really interested in fixing the EU. She's not really interested in fixing European democracy. She's not really interested in making the whole disaster area work for once. No, she's not interested, because she'd rather be working directly for the Americans as the head of NATO. But now her own politicians, her own chancellor, has told her that, no, we don't want you. So now, as a consolation prize, she goes back to Brussels, she goes back to the EU, which is crazy. Is this what we want? Somebody who leads the EU because she can't get any other job and nobody else wants her? Is that really what we want? Or should von der Leyen just not be given this job? Not because she is a traitor to Europe. Let's be honest about this. She worked for the Americans. How many times must she stand in front of an American flag, in front of the Star-Spangled Banner in Washington, and tell us that, yes, we have ways of dealing with politicians who don't want to do what we say, which is what she said in Washington when Maloney was elected. She stood there in Washington and said, yes, we have ways of dealing with people like that.
We'll see if things go in a difficult direction. I've spoken about Hungary and Poland. We have tools. If things go in the right direction, and people as a body that is always, where always governments have to be accountable to, play an important role. And
clearly they had, because now Giorgia Meloni is very nicely doing exactly everything that the EU wants. I mean, I wonder what kind of blackmail they have over her, or who they threatened to break her will. But this is what we have right now. This is what we see right now. That the one person who has shown that she's a traitor to Europe, not the one person, but that she's the biggest traitor to Europe, a politician who has said that she rather work for the Americans than for Europeans, a traitor, an outright traitor, is now going to be given a second chance to do it all over again. Another 4 more years running the EU into the ground. Now, is this something we want? No, this is not something we want, because she does not deserve that job. She does not, because Europe deserves better than Ursula von der Leyen and her whole Commission ilk.